So welcome to the lighting and shading part of this course. So I waited a bit for doing this part of the course, and you might think like, why didn't I cover anything from this on the absolute basics part in the first couple of lessons? Well, the reason for that is because I think a lot of other courses probably do that, but I thought it would make more sense to first teach you just the general basics of like working with Houdini, and then do the lighting and shading part once we will actually start implementing the lighting and shading onto our models and our objects. Because else I will teach you how to do it, and then by the time you get to this part of the course, you have already forgotten how it works. And right now, I'm just going to teach you the basics, and we're immediately going to implement it onto our models. So I thought it would make more sense to do it that way. So yeah, that's why I waited so long to start with the basics for that. So we're gonna go over like how do we create lights, how do we create shaders, how do we create cameras, how do we render out things. So basically, yeah, stuff like that. So the course itself will be using Redshift for the most part, because I am just most familiar with using Redshift, and I have a lot more GPU render power than I have CPU render power. So if you're not familiar with those concepts, a lot of render engines use your CPU, so your CPU. But last couple of years there has been a surge in render engines that use your GPU, and basically the difference is that a CPU has a couple of cores that can do a lot, and a GPU has a ton of cores, like thousands of cores that can do very small operations. But if you know how to if those cores are programmed in a way to sort of work together really well, then you can technically create much faster render engines. So GPU rendering is generally a lot faster than CPU rendering, and it's very up and coming. And I have a couple of GPUs in my machine, and I generally just use Redshift because it's just a lot faster. And I'm also just more familiar with using Redshift. So, and I really wanted to get a high-end end result to this course, which was just easier and to get with Redshift, because right now already it was about 10 to 12 minutes per frame to render this, and on Mantra it would have taken probably over 2 hours. So that's a part of the reason. And I'm just going to be able to explain better for Redshift. But again, you can also follow along with all of the things that I do with other render engines. I will first start explaining the basics of lighting and shading in Houdini with Mantra. And then once I explain the basics with Mantra, I will move stuff over to Redshift, and then we'll start doing stuff with Redshift. So don't worry about if you don't have Redshift. You can install a demo for Redshift on redshift3d.com. I'll be using Redshift 3.0 for the course, and that will have some features that are not in the demo, because the demo is still on Redshift 2.6. But don't worry, I'll go over some of the stuff that might not be in the 2.6 release and how you could do that differently. And if you decide to use another render engine, once you know the basics of how it works in Houdini, you could basically implement it anyway, like with another render engine as well. All of the basics are the same. They use FOPs for shading. So don't worry about it. But let's first just dive into just how just basic shading works. So by the way, if you want to install Redshift for Houdini, you download the demo. And then what you need to do is you need to go into your Houdini.environment folder, which will be on Documents. Then you go to your Houdini folder, and then you see Houdini.environment. If you open it, you need to add a couple of lines in here. So you need to add, so I have a couple of more lines that you will probably have, but let me show you which ones you need to add. You need to add this, and you need to add this. So you need to add these two lines. And this part needs to point to your current Houdini build. So sometimes if you have a newer Houdini build installed, it might not be there, and sometimes it might work and sometimes not. But generally just then point it to the latest, so you can see all the builds here. Generally just put it to the latest build. If it doesn't work, just downgrade Houdini to match that build. So anyway, so that's how you install Redshift Houdini. But let's now just first go into Houdini, and let's just start explaining how we can make lights, how we can do a render, and just the very basic stuff. And once I got the very basic stuff out of the way, I will be moving the rest to Redshift. So I won't be going super into detail on how stuff works with Mantra. If you want to know more about shading with Mantra, I suggest just looking up some Mantra shading courses, because this course is not going to do much Mantra shading, but I will be showing the basics. Right, so let's create some objects. Let's create a grid. Control click on the grid, and let's create a sphere. Control click on the sphere. Let's move the sphere up like this. Maybe let's create a box. Let's maybe scale our grid up a little bit. And now we need to create a camera. So we haven't done that yet, because right now we've mostly been just moving along in our viewport, but we can actually create a camera. So if you click on here and then go to new camera, it will create a camera from your view. You could also go to the lights tab here and the shelf tools, and then control click on the camera, and it will also create a camera from the view. Or you could just type camera here, and that will create a camera in the origin, or you could click here and then put it wherever you want. So let's just for now do one camera. So if I am in the right now I'm outside of the camera again. If I click on here, I can go into the camera. And if I want to move the camera, I need to click the lock icon, and then the camera will move with the view. If I don't do that, the camera will stay there. As you can see, it's now over there. So let's get back into it. All right. Now we have these objects. And now let's start doing some, let's open a render view. So let's open up the thing here in the bottom. Again, you can split the views with Alt and the brackets, and you can open up a thing like that. Let's open up a render view. Click the little plus icon, go to new tab pane, go to Mantra rendering, and open up a render view. So you get a render view, and let me show you what will happen if I press render. So if I go to out, so on here, go to out. Right now out is empty, but if I press render, you can see it put down a Mantra ROP. So ROP is a rendering operator. So that has all of these settings for rendering. So this is going to take a while, and Mantra usually takes a while to start up. Once it's already started up, it's generally pretty responsive somewhat. So let's wait for this to start up. All right, there we go. So you can see this is our scene. Now if we move our camera, it will also move in there. Now it's somewhat responsive. So it's looking a little bit boring. So maybe light or something. So let's add a light. So I'm gonna remove the lock so I can just move in here, and let's add a light somewhere. So to move, and then we can add a light. So there's a couple of different lights we can add. So for example, let's add a spotlight. Let's have a look. So this is our spot. So you can see it's shining a light in the viewport. If we go on light, we have settings here for intensity and exposure. Basically, you have intensity and exposure for that thing. So let's just turn that down. And then we have settings on here for like the cone angle. So we could like make it a small cone. Like get some just general settings. You could change the color. So you could make it an orange light. And just how you do a spotlight. So there's multiple types of light. So that's a spot, and that just behaves like a spot. This makes sense. You also have a point light. So a point light will be a light which is infinitely small, so just coming from one point. That's why these shadows are pretty hard. Coming from an infinitely small point. So I can increase the thing. So apart from that, it doesn't really have a lot of things. So I can change things like shadow intensity and just transformation options. Generally, for more realistic shadows, what you use is area lights. Let's make an area light. So an area light will emit from a shape. So just like a real light would, I guess. Let's increase the intensity. So this thing is now emitting from this shape. You can see now we get like softer shape because it's emitting from this square thing. So if we were to make this bigger, you can see slowly the shadows start getting more softer. If we make this like super small, like I said before, like let's make it 0, 1. You can see right now we get a super hard shadow. So this area light can have multiple shapes. So let me see, it can be a grid, can be a line, can be a sphere. Okay, multiple types. You can change the color. So those are just the very basic lights. You have other lights. You also have a distant light. So let's create a distant light. Like a sun, for example. So distant light will be infinitely far away. So as you can see, if I move this, so it sort of behaves like a sun would. You have a give some error, but you have a skylight which has which is also an infinite light, but it has settings for the sky. So it has like, yeah, like it will create sort of a look for a sky as well. So you could create like a sky like that. So let's remove the. So you can see this creates a skylight, and there's a sun here. Let's remove these. So a whole bunch of light types, and you have a light dome, so an environment light. If I create this will create sort of a sphere around the entire scene, and it will shine light from everywhere. You can see right now everything is super soft. What you generally use an environment light for is to use HDRI. So an HDRI is a high dynamic range image of a 360 high dynamic range image of an environment. I will get more into what high dynamic range exactly is in a little bit, but for now just keep in mind that it's there. So they have HDRI Haven. This guy makes basically free HDRIs. You can donate to him on Patreon. So get a nice HDRI. I've already downloaded one. You can get your environment light, and then you have your environment map here, and then we can put it in there, and you can see right now I see like my environment there. Let's increase the intensity a little bit. So now it will use this actual to light this scene. Right, so maybe let's start adding some material so we actually have some more interesting stuff going on. So if you go to your material network, so if you go to the drop-down menu and then go to matte, so there's also shop, which was the old way of shading, but now you have matte. So go to the matte context, and over here, let's open up the material palette. So the material palette is just like a library of just preset materials. So let's add some preset materials. So let's say we want what do we want? So metal paint is maybe nice. So let's do gold. Everybody likes gold. And let's do tinted glass or something. Right, so let's do metal paint. Let's drag it on the ground. Let's do tinted glass on the sphere and gold on the thing. So I can see it looks a little bit more interesting. So you can change these materials as well. So if I go to the metal paint, I could say that, okay, I don't want it to be green. I just want it to be white. You can see there's some reflections and stuff going here, and it's a little bit slow. Metro is slow anyway, but I limited the core count because I recorded this part earlier and the audio was completely dropping out because of because of Mantra rendering. So anyway, so you have these material presets. We could get more, we could like say, okay, piano lacquer, and then maybe drag that on the ground instead. So now you can see the clouds get reflected. That's pretty cool. But we can also make our own. So this is just a preset, and of course you can change these presets like I just showed you, but we can also make our own. So all these materials used are just basically presets on the principled shader. So the principled shader is just, it's a UBA shader, basically. So we can also make our own principled shader. So if we just type principled shader, we can drop one down. And so the principled shader is basically, so let's close all these windows here so we have some more room, is basically a lot of, so shading uses VOP nodes, so similar that we'd be using in VOPs, but then, well, as a for shader building. So if I double click on the principled shader, well, it will say network does not display VOP nodes, blah, 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 because it uses, but we can also make it editable. So we can actually see what they're doing inside of here. So let's right click and allow editing of contents. Just gonna think for a little bit. So if you now dive in, you see a huge network of stuff. So this is what's actually driving the shader. So the principled shader core, and then it has a lot of parameters put into it and stuff. And just the principled shader here is just to make it easy to do stuff yourself. So if you want to follow along with the course and you don't have Redshift, you're probably going to use the principled shader for all of stuff. So let's drag our principled shader onto the sphere. So now it will become beautifully gray. So let's go a little bit about the basics here. And again, I'm not going to go super deep into mantra shading, but I will discuss the basics and then we're going to move into Redshift. So maybe also close this. All right, so there's a couple of things here. So basically all the parameters here are just from inside the shader, but then they're exposed to the top level. So we have some stuff that we can change. Like we have the base color, which is just the diffuse color. So diffuse color is basically just, just the base color of something. Like if you have a, whatever, if you have a rubber bottle or something, it's a green rubber bottle, then that would be, like the diffuse of that bottle would be green. So you can also change the intensity. So if I make the intensity low, it will just be black because it won't have any line bouncing off it. Because remember, how do colors work? It means that light is hitting an object, and then what is it gonna reflect? It's only gonna reflect the diffuse color. But if I put it to 0, then it's not gonna reflect anything back. So there's also the specular. So it's basically the how specular, so how reflective is my sphere. So if I crank up the IOR, so the index of refraction, it will reflect back more. So you can look at an IOR list if you want. So you have a whole list of materials and what their index of refraction is. If you want to keep stuff accurate, then you can use an IOR list like that. So this is using specular model. You can also use a metallic, like a metalness. So this will be a metallic type thing. You can increase the reflectivity if I wanted to. You can have code reflections. Let's just turn this down. Let's just use the specular model. You can have transparency. If I turn that up, you can see now it completely ignores the base color because it's a refractive material, and refractive materials don't really have a base color. Let's turn down the index of refraction to like something like 1.5, which is, I think, water. You can look in here and search for water. Oh, water at 35 degrees is this. Okay, let's do it 1.35 then. I thought it was higher. Let's do this. So now it's a water sphere basically. So turn down the roughness. So then it will be completely see-through. So you can see now it reflects all of the nice stuff. And if you increase the roughness, it will be a very rough sphere. So basic stuff. Let's turn down the transparency again. So you can also do other stuff on this. You can also we can also add textures, for example. So if you go, this is just the basic surface stuff. So let's put the color, just the color to white. Let's go to the textures tab. You can enable textures here. So I can enable the base color and go in here. And if I go to here, HFS / Houdini / Pixar textures are the Houdini built-in textures that only work with Mantra. Let's have a look at one. Maybe do what's this? Let's do concrete, or let's do another one. Let's do metal. That looks cool. And we can change the, if we go into settings, we can change the scale of our UV. I think we need to make it smaller. Let's make 0.1. So Mantra is quite slow, so it takes a while to sort of actually show us properly what we're looking at. Maybe we should do, okay, this is looking good. So, okay, we have this. Okay, so this really doesn't look a lot like metal yet. So I guess we would use, let's use a roughness. I think there's probably a metal roughness. Let's have a look. So metal roughness. Let's increase the, so again, I normally never use mantras. I'm also not super familiar with a lot of the stuff here, but you can put the textures in here. I can use let's use another texture maybe. Let's use bricks or something. Use the brick roughness. Where are they? Roughness. Let's turn down this thing. Let's turn down the index of refraction. And let's enable some displacement. So displacement is basically when we were doing in VOPs, when we were like adding noise to our position. Well, it's doing the same, but then in the shader. So let's add displacement. So I can see now it suddenly adds detail to the object. Let's change the scale a little bit. You can see we get some we get displacement. We can increase the effect scale, and it will. So now you can see now the bricks are actually extruding. So that's how you can do like stuff like displacement. So, but you can also, like, instead of doing it all in here, so turn that off, you could also add texture by just plugging them in like this. And then we get it like that. And then we've also added our, added our thing basically. So I think there's also probably triplanar. I have honestly never used triplanar inside of Redshift, or inside of Mantra, so I have no idea how this works. You know what? Let's not do that. So anyway, so you can add stuff in your shader. You can build out your shader like that. So a lot of the stuff we're gonna do, you could follow along with this, but like, again, if you want to know more about Mantra, I suggest just looking up some Mantra courses. But like, this is the basics of Mantra. And if you want to start rendering out images and stuff, I'm gonna show how to do that inside the Redshift part of this course. So we're gonna dive into Redshift. And then we're gonna show you how to render out images, and that will be similar to how you do it in Mantra. Again, I just first wanted to do a very brief overview over how stuff like this works inside of Houdini. And now we're gonna move over to Redshift, because with Redshift I actually know more about what I'm talking about. So then we're gonna go into that. But again, if you want to know more about mantra, look up some mantra.